Good evening, everyone. Welcome to American Advocates. This should be episode 110, coming to you live on June 3rd, 2026. That's, of course, Wednesday, June 3rd, 2026. Got a lot to discuss today, so be sure to like the stream if you haven't already, or this video if you're watching the live stream replay. Also, be sure to subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this if you wind up enjoying it. We are now officially day 95 of the Iran war. The ceasefire continues to hang on by a thread with no end in sight to this war whatsoever. Same pattern still playing out. Gonna get into that a little bit with some updates about what's going on behind the scenes centered around Israel's plans for us, as well as learning a little bit more about this whole President Donald Trump phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu. And then on top of it, I'm going to get into Henry Nowak. Welcome, Spartacus. Henry Nowak. Henry Nowak, the British national, a student from, I believe it was Southampton or whatever it's called, over in the UK, killed by a Sikh man over in the UK, stabbed to death, and was treated as a suspect and criminal while he bled out on the pavement, while the Sikh man basically accused Henry of racism right up front upon the police arriving. And that simple accusation was more than enough for the police to determine on the spot who was guilty and who was innocent. And it ultimately resulted in an 18-year-old white Englishman bleeding out on the pavement, arrested. His hands were handcuffed behind his back as he begged for help and died. And there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from that story here in the United States. I'm going to go over all of those lessons and my personal outlook on all of that for our top story, because I've been tweeting about it for several days now on my Twitter, which is obviously you guys should follow that. I'll actually share the link to that right now. If you want a more loose cannon version of me, follow me on Twitter right here. You guys should absolutely follow me there. I've been tweeting about this Henry Nowak situation for quite a few days now, been mentioning it all over my social media because it is outrageous and it is something that should fill you with rage. And so that's going to be the top story. But I want to, before getting into Henry Nowak, hello Eddie, welcome. Hello Spartacus Lifeguard, thank you guys for being here. MMMM, good to see you as well. Before I get into that, I do want to go over the Iran war update for today. It's become a bit of a tradition here on this channel. So again, day 95 coming to an end right now. 95 days. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. Except for, of course, unfortunately, I can believe it. And I'll say it like I do every time. I am vindicated and validated as always in my Iran war predictions and how I said from the start that this would go much longer than 4 to 6 weeks. And here we are in the 14th week, which will be coming to a close this Friday evening coming up. No end in sight, and a ceasefire that hangs on by threads, according to both sides now. That's those sides being Iran and the United States. So that's what's been happening right now. 101 billion. $277,250,000 has been spent on this Iran war so far, and it's only going to continue to get more expensive, and I'm loving every second of it. I can't wait for gas prices to hit $5 a gallon, because when that happens, we're going to see all of the people, all of the MAGA cultists out there who will come into my chat, for instance, the absolute retards like Teflon Don, who for some reason can't fathom the idea that I actually am a conservative who just has the balls to criticize President Donald Trump. I know that's a bit unheard of in your precious little MAGA cult. But for retards like that, they'll come in chat and they'll say, $4.70 a gallon? Still cheaper than it was under Biden. And when we hit that $5 a gallon mark, I want to know. I just want to know at that point, $5 a gallon national average. which of course under Biden that was at its peak. It was at $5.01 national average under Biden. And I can't wait to hear what their next excuse is. If we say it hits $5.02 a gallon national average, or $5.12 a gallon national average, which it looks like is pretty much inevitable at this point, as Trump continues to sell off our oil reserves to other foreign countries, and all of the absolute 90 IQ MAGA cheerleaders out there actually celebrate that because they have no idea what it actually means for our president to be selling our strategic oil reserve supply. And they say, see that? Trump is so smart. He's such a good businessman. He is now selling oil to China. And they'll say that like it's a win. And of course, I've covered at length more than once on this channel why it's anything but a win. First of all, China, our economic rival, has actually some of the deepest oil reserves privately, which allows them to outlast us the most, or outlast any country for that matter. But why wouldn't China just come to America and buy up some of our oil? Like, why wouldn't they? And so I've mentioned this, and how we're going to need those oil reserves in July and August, and how Trump is selling them, which depletes them faster, and why this is actually a terrible idea. But nevertheless, Trump's doing it, and all of the idiots, all of the MAGA retards celebrate this. So, stop everything before we move on in the story here. $5 coming in the form of a super chat tariff from BeckFan77, and he says 93 days on Earth is only 4/5 of a day on Venus. Checkmark. 5D chess. And you're spot on. Actually, I can't believe I didn't factor that in already. Trump is playing 5D chess because he's actually on Venus. He released the alien files as a distraction to deflect from the fact that he himself has made contact with the aliens, and he's currently now working with CENTCOM and the Pentagon on Venus. And so you're absolutely spot on with that. Thank you for the $5 super chat. So anyways, where I last left you guys off here, and how I want to tie this into some of the latest news, and this is actually not even breaking news. I wanted to cover this like for 4 or 5 days now, but I've just run out of time every single time, so we're going to get into it first and foremost before moving on to this insane Henry Nowak situation from Britain, and just what kind of a lesson Americans can learn from this situation when it comes to nationalism and when it comes to everything that we need to learn to embrace more. So before we move on to that, I want to finally get to this, and where I last left you guys off when it comes to the more fascinating chain of events beyond the usual. It's a ceasefire, but we struck Iran in preemptive self-defense strikes. Then they struck us back. Now Trump's pissed, and he's threatening to nuke them if they don't make a deal soon. I can only report on that for so often before it's like, I know a lot of people don't have great pattern recognition, very low IQ in chat. Trump's totally winning in the Middle East, and you don't know what you're talking about. I can only cover that for so long and say, hey, look, do you see the pattern yet? Do you see it yet? No, you're just permanently stupid? Okay. So some of the more juicy details that I've gone over where I've left you guys off on Trump, to recap, Trump recently reported a U.S.-Iran peace deal was closer to being done than it had been so far. 95% complete, just really waiting on signatures. That's all, we just need the signatures. And in the past, it was only 90% complete ever, so I guess it was 5% closer to being done than what we were used to. And this is what Trump was celebrating over what, 2 weekends ago, or this past weekend. And then we see basically Iran using this to their advantage. Like I've reported on multiple times on this channel, they're playing 5D chess geostrategically against Israel, really. And so it's quite the opposite, where MAGA says Trump's playing 5D chess against China, using Iran to do so, which is not true at all whatsoever. It is actually Iran playing 5D chess with Israel, using Trump as their ultimate pawn to do so. And so every time we get close to this kind of a deal being made, where even Iran will say, yeah, things aren't actually going too bad. Usually it's Iran saying none of that's true. What Trump is saying is not true. But on the occasion where Iran says, well, Trump is still blowing it out of proportion. However, some of what Trump is saying is not completely false, and we are working on a deal. What Iran will then do is they'll wait for Trump to celebrate it publicly, because Trump can't help himself but to prematurely ejaculate and celebrate these deals. It's what he does, because Trump is desperate for an exit ramp. And Trump is also desperate to continue gaslighting our marketplaces, our commodities markets, our oil futures, to keep them stable, or as stable as possible, understanding what's at play here and what's really at risk. And it's worked thus far. Nevertheless, Iran waits for this to capitalize off of it. And then they play their 5D chess game by then announcing, yeah, you know what? We are interested in a deal. However, it's completely contingent on Israel ceasing all hostilities in Lebanon. And that's the real gotcha in all of this. Stop everything. Before we move on, I got to recognize this. Z Corp Alpha 2462 with the $9.99 super chat tariff. Massive W for Z Corp Alpha. And he says, what about Christians in Palestine? That's not a question MAGA wants to ask. And that's why I always say I am a conservative that's not MAGA, because I'm here to discuss the uncomfortable truths. So yes, the Christians in Palestine, or how about what I'm covering right now when it comes to Lebanon and how it's a 40% Christian country that Israel is just demolishing in the southern border of. And nobody wants to talk about that either. Nobody on the MAGA side of the aisle really wants to sit down and watch the videos of the IDF soldiers tearing down the statues of Jesus on the cross outside of the churches that were hit by artillery strikes. But in typical fashion, the Jesus cross statues remain standing. The IDF soldiers can't tolerate that, though. Nobody wants to watch those videos of them ripping Jesus off the cross and then bashing his head in, the Jesus statue's head in, with a brick. People don't like talking about that. So thank you for that, Z Core Alpha. Now, this is how Iran gets Trump back on point. This is how they get Trump. They say it's contingent. This deal is contingent on Israel ceasing all hostilities in Lebanon. And this is the 5D chess truly being played out right now. And why is that? It's because every time they publicly announce this, they know, Iran knows, as much as Trump does, that Israel will hear that, and man, they will get excited. Not at the notion of peace, of course, because Israel doesn't want peace. Israel gets excited at the notion of finally having another window open for them to be able to blow up the deal and ensure that it's not finalized, which then by default ensures that the U.S. must remain present in the Middle East, and specifically remain present in their aggression or in the tension between the U.S. and Iran, which is what Israel wants to maintain. Israel's not on our side in this case. They're not actually our greatest ally. It's Israel calling themselves our greatest ally is no different than the Muslims saying that they practice the religion of peace. You tell a lie long enough and some people will believe it, and that's part of the psyop. And so Israel doesn't want us leaving because they want to finish doing what they're doing in Lebanon and in Gaza. And then when that's done, they then want us to finish with Iran and move on to Turkey and Egypt. And so any chance they can get to blow up these deals and ruin them, they're going to take. And Iran knows this, and so does Trump, which is why he was reportedly cussing out Benjamin Netanyahu the other day. Going to get back to that in a second. And they blow up the deal. And Iran is playing 5D chess by recognizing that this is the reality of the circumstance. And that's why every time we're close, they say, not so fast. Control Israel. Stop them from attacking Lebanon, and then we have a deal. They know it will fail, but they also know that by asking that, more Americans who want to stay informed on this, or who recognize, hey, I thought Trump said 3 days or 3 weeks. Why the fuck are we in the 14th week with no end in sight? More Americans will look into it a little bit more. And inevitably, out of those Americans, most are too stupid. They're goyim, they're scum, they don't know. But out of every so often, a few more Americans will come to the truth. And so they're weaponizing pretty much everybody against Israel. And they're using Israel's warmongering hostility, and they're using the Zionist corruption and control in our own American political system to display all of this worldwide. And it is working. More and more countries now, more than ever, have turned their backs on Israel. Thank you for the gold coin, John Boy. Appreciate that. I saw somebody else gave me a 2-jewel gift as well. I appreciate that as well. If I missed it, sorry. But they recognize this. And this is the true 5D chess being played as a result. We've seen countries like Spain, we've seen specific locations in Central and South America, we've seen Italy, we've seen France, and even in some parts the UK and Canada now developing a little bit more of an anti-Zionist and more of a shunning of Israel publicly kind of rhetoric and narrative as a result of this. And it continues to humiliate President Donald Trump. And truthfully, it continues to expose and humiliate many of our corrupt politicians in our own political system here in America every time Iran basically asks for what should be an easy, what should be an easy request. Iran is literally saying, hey, please tell Israel to stop attacking Lebanon and then we'll work towards a deal. I mean, what are they asking for here? Well, they're the ones asking for peace. This is literally what they're asking for. You have to understand this. Iran is playing a game, but the actual request is the most reasonable request you could ever hope to receive from your enemy during such times. And that is literally a request for peace. That is literally a ceasefire request. This is what Iran, the hardline IRGC regime that leads it, is asking for. And it continually falls through at the hands of our greatest ally. And that's the 5D chess that's been playing out. And what happens here is Israel hears this, and so they do what any rational warmongering nation would do. They announce their plans to resume strikes in Lebanon, and that's what took place over this past week. Israel had previously paused this very radical, very extreme plan to not just target southern Lebanon like they've been doing, which is, granted, full of Hezbollah militants. It is occupied in large parts by Hezbollah. But now they also recently had come up with this plan to strike Beirut, which is the very civilized-looking capital of Lebanon. We're talking, you Google the images, and it looks like close to a modern city with skyscrapers, tall apartment buildings, hotels, very capital city looking. And Israel was going to use their IAF, Israeli Air Force, to bomb Beirut. And they were basically justifying it by saying, well, Hezbollah has a presence in Beirut. And that's how they're going to do it. This was previously paused, however, at the request of President Donald Trump as we continue to try to work towards peace with Iran. And then, when Iran names the contingency of Israel stopping all strikes in Lebanon, Israel jumps at the chance to ruin it by saying, hey, guess what? We're resuming strikes in Beirut now. And this is what set Trump off and led us to the leaked Axios report that I covered, about 2 episodes now, episode 108 of American Advocates. Again, be sure to like the stream as you guys come on in. Double tap your phone screens. It's free to do. It helps YouTube push this show out to more people. And also, of course, subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this, or like the content I've been producing on this channel for over 100 days now, specifically talking about stories like the leaked Axios, the Axios reporting of the leaked internal administrative story about Trump cussing out Benjamin Netanyahu. Because that's where I pretty much left off here. Trump calls Benjamin Netanyahu, hearing the news that he basically has reinstated and unpaused his plan to bomb Beirut, fully recognizing what that would mean for peace between the U.S. and Iran, and doing it intentionally. It's really a win-win for Benjamin Netanyahu. He gets to bomb Beirut, continue attacking Lebanon, which they want to do, and he gets to blow up a peace deal between the U.S. and Iran, which justifies keeping the U.S. in the Middle East, keeping our presence there even longer, which benefits Israel even more. Trump calls him out, though, over this, and calls him on the phone, reportedly cussing him out, asking him, what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck is wrong with you? I'm saving your ass. You'd be in prison if it weren't for me. This is why everybody hates you, and now everybody hates Israel because of this. And that was the leaked reports put out by Axios. And what we see in the aftermath is what I went over yesterday briefly, which is, of course, the aftermath following all of this. I think is very obvious to anybody who knows how to read in between the lines and knows what to look for. So Trump does this. He took credit for it today, by the way, in an interview with the New York Post, and he said, "I did say that. We still have a great working relationship, but things get a little tense. But we always figure it out. We always figure out how to solve our problems, and we're united on all the main things." And Benjamin Netanyahu also addressed it just technically yesterday for them, saying something similar basically. Well, we agree on the main points, but sometimes we argue. And he wouldn't get in. He didn't want to get into the details. And the aftermath of this phone call and what I said was going to be the case on this channel, where I said, "Hey, nice to see Trump publicly displaying some balls and not being a complete cuck to Israel. However, that being said, what matters is what happens behind the scenes." And what we saw play out behind the scenes, I think, was very obvious, and I went over that yesterday. So Trump makes this aggressive phone call. Thank you for the gift as well, there, Jamie Simmer. Thank you, appreciate that. So what we see is Trump basically calls Benjamin Netanyahu, screams at him. This applies political public pressure to Benjamin Netanyahu. And I went over why that is as well. In summary, very quickly, Benjamin Netanyahu's not very popular even with his own Israeli people. And he's got an election coming up this year in October. He only has 16% net favorability with the Israelis. However, Trump's at 99% favorability. So publicly, Trump actually has complete and total power over Benjamin Netanyahu from a political standpoint. And so that's why when things like this get leaked and things go public like this, it's probably very likely a deliberate part of Trump's administrative strategy to allow these stories to be leaked, because it's really the way Trump can fight back against Benjamin Netanyahu, who no doubt is utilizing a very carrot and stick like strategy against Trump, just the same as Israel has done with many of our other politicians in the past and in the present still. And so that's what causes that, and the result is what we see take place after this phone call. I mentioned it yesterday, and I said, here's what happens here. The story about Melania Trump gets released in suspiciously timed fashion. And of course, that story that was leaked was by the Brazilian model who was deported under this Trump administration by her Italian husband. And she leaks the story that, well, it turns out maybe Melania Trump met Donald Trump because of Jeffrey Epstein. I went over all the details of that story on yesterday's episode, and that story didn't get leaked by accident, nor was the timing of it being leaked yesterday, the day after Trump's aggressive phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu, which forced Israel to pause their plans to bomb Beirut, Lebanon, for a second time. That was not a coincidence, the timing of that story being leaked. And I predicted that would be the case on this channel when I said that the bottom line was Melania, when she came out back in early April, was attempting to get out in front of a story, very likely because the Trump family was being blackmailed by, do I need to say it even? Because the timing of the story being released yesterday, again, was not a coincidence. What results from this? Immediately after this story is leaked, we then get news that the U.S. has resumed bombing in Iran, specifically targeting Qasem Island. And they bombed Qasem Island yesterday, causing severe Iranian retaliation that has now threatened the resumption of basically full-blown war in the Middle East. And the term now that they're using is the ceasefire is hanging on by a thread, which, again, I pointed out yesterday or 2 days ago, even the term ceasefire is really no longer applicable in the current circumstance or situation in the Middle East. Ceasefire literally means all fire ceases, and we've done nothing but bomb each other ever since the announcement of the ceasefire. So that's where we're at on that. Now, speeding us up to that point, despite the U.S. striking first, CENTCOM also went on to insist that these were preemptive and self-defense strikes on Qasem Islands, and all of this is taking place well past the 90-day mark. And this is what I want to hone in on for the two Iran Middle East stories I want to cover today before moving on to what I'm going to consider the top story, which is revisiting the Henry Nowak situation over in the UK and how he was killed by an illegal, a foreign invader, brown Sikh man over in Britain. But before we move on to that, I want to go over these these other stories in the Middle East. And CENTCOM basically, CENTCOM says these were self-defense strikes, but what's important to understand here is we're now well past, as I announced, we are on day 95, coming to a close. And when we bombed Qasem Island, that was day 93/day 94. And that's past the 90-day mark, which is significant for a whole host of different reasons, but mainly because of the War Powers Resolution Act and what it allows the president to do and what it doesn't allow the president to do. And so, of course, President Donald Trump, as with any president, as the commander-in-chief, is allowed to bypass Congress initially using the military, as is in his title commander-in-chief, to basically deem something to be a credible enough threat to our national security and allow him to use our military to neutralize that threat, sending troops in, sending the Navy and Air Force in, etc. And this is like the loophole that many presidents have used before Trump, and very likely presidents after Trump will use as well. But the problem is, he's only allowed to do that within a 90-day window. And now what we're seeing is we're in day 95, and these strikes are still happening, and Trump is supposed to be de-escalating in the Middle East. In fact, we really should have been pulled out altogether by now, but he isn't. And he's using the ceasefire as the justification for why we still have a presence there, because he said, well, we actually created the ceasefire even before day 90, so we actually ended it before the 90 days were up. And this is more of a gray area loophole that's being exploited by this administration. But that's why today, or at least perhaps why today, we have finally seen, and this is news today, the House of Representatives for the first time so far. This is attempt number 8 in the congressional chambers. And on attempt number 8, the House of Representatives actually succeeded this time in now voting to pass a bill to fight back against Trump's actions in Iran. In a vote of 215 to 208 this time, every single Democrat united with 3 Republicans only, and those Republicans were Thomas Massey, 4 Republicans, Massey, Fitzpatrick, Barrett, and Davidson. These were the 4 Republican yays that joined with every single Democrat in the House of Representatives to pass what MAGA is now calling an anti-Trump war powers resolution that would theoretically force President Donald Trump to draw back the U.S. military and pull troops out of the Middle East, as he probably should have been doing for the last 35 days. Because truthfully, under the War Powers Resolution Act, Trump has 60 days that he's entitled to full-blown strikes and warfare, and for the last 30 days, he's supposed to already be in the process of drawing back and of basically pulling out. And it's been Congress and it's been the House and the Senate that has basically been preventing this from occurring and allowing Trump to continue and push forward, without explicitly, by the way, giving Trump permission either, because Congress is supposed to decide ultimately whether or not Trump can move forward or whether he needs to end it. And essentially what's going on under Mike Johnson's leadership as the House Majority Leader is Mike Johnson won't deal with the issue really. And the votes the votes to even pass and move forward in discussion aren't succeeding. They keep falling short. And so Congress has neither given Trump permission to go forward, nor have they revoked his permission to continue. And this has allowed this massive gray area loophole of Trump continuing on in this ceasefire that's not very cease-ish and all fire to continue happening. And so they passed it today. Now, this is largely being treated as a symbolic victory. And this is because they don't have enough votes to resist what will inevitably be a Trump veto. When this moves to Trump's desk, if it gets to that point, Trump will veto this. And he'll do it, and he won't care, because Israel will demand that he does. And it's all about serving Israel. So he will veto this. He will not pull out, and he will continue in Iran regardless. And that's just the reality of all of this. But nevertheless, it's a symbolic victory that could also be representative of a tide turning in our American political system. It's also not good for President Donald Trump, of course, because Iran will no doubt be paying attention to this. They'll hear about this, and they'll know what this actually signals and what this signifies. And that is, of course, that even politically now, the system is turning against Trump, which increases the amount of leverage that Iran has over President Donald Trump in the negotiating process. Because now, Iran's already been intentionally drawing this war out as long as possible. And this ceasefire that's hanging by a thread is truly only hanging by a thread because Iran actually is weaponizing and utilizing this ceasefire much more effectively than most people would have given them credit for. The common sentiment was that a ceasefire would actually benefit the United States more, a prolonged ceasefire, that is, would benefit the U.S. more than Iran, because we would hypothetically be able to produce and restock on many of our interceptors and our missiles, and come up with a better striking strategy for another round of attacks on Iran. That being said, what Iran has managed to do is dangle hope in front of President Donald Trump of an actual deal, while playing their 5D chess and stipulating every time Israel and controlling Israel, which Trump will not do. Trump is a cuck to Benjamin Netanyahu, and he will submit to Israel every time. And Iran knows this, and this draws out the ceasefire longer and longer, all the while our U.S. economy continues to hurt more and more. The global economy continues to move towards depression-like territory. Global oil reserve supply is running lower and lower and lower, along with our U.S. strategic oil reserves, and so much more. Inflation going up, gas prices going up, etc. And so Iran is now on the end where they're wielding this like a weapon, this drawn out, prolonged ceasefire with no real negotiating results taking place. And now they're going to get wind of this. They're going to hear about this, and they're going to recognize that if they can continue drawing this out even longer, perhaps even the political system itself will turn on President Donald Trump and then force Trump to leave the region altogether. And I've discussed why Trump pulling out of the region, even of his own volition, is actually a bad idea, because it immediately gives Iran complete control of the Strait of Hormuz, which is largely the main focus now on this administration. Beyond that of even the enriched uranium and the nuclear facility program going forward in the future, which was mostly bullshit being fed to us by Israel to begin with, now it's really the Strait of Hormuz that is the ultimate point to concentrate on. And if Trump pulled out of the region of his own volition a couple of weeks ago, they would take control of the Strait of Hormuz, and that's a very obvious and strategic loss for the United States that damages our credibility, undermines the Pax Americana, undermines international maritime, Freedom of Navigation Act law, etc., and really changes the global economy forever. But Iran will see this and they'll recognize, well, Trump won't leave of his own volition, but perhaps if we wait long enough, the House of Representatives, even some Republicans, will start turning on Trump, and they can get enough votes in the House to force Trump to leave. The reason why this is symbolic is Trump can veto this, and the House currently at 215 votes does not have enough votes to override the veto. But if they get to a point where they get enough votes to override a veto, that's it. Trump must then withdraw. And at that point, he doesn't have a choice. So Iran will be incentivized to draw this out even more. But beyond that, it's also what's happening right now with the House of Representatives, and what we saw today with this symbolic vote victory that the Democrats are declaring victory over is reflective of even deeper problems going on right now in our American political system. And those problems include issues like support for foreign wars in general waning, and how the Republicans, as always, are behind the eight ball and slower to adjust to this, while the Democrats have been the party now figuring out what actually has pissed off Americans. And the Democrats, just in time for midterms, are now beginning to embrace all of it. They're now targeting and speaking out against data center construction. They're speaking out against foreign wars. They're criticizing Israel more. And on top of it, they're also mentioning the Epstein files and justice for the Epstein files. And these are all talking points that are going to unequivocally win them the 2026 midterm election, because Republicans want data centers built all over America. Republicans now at least pretend, most of them, to support foreign wars, which makes them neocons. We haven't gotten rid of the neocons. We haven't drained the swamp. The MAGA Trump administration has become the neoconservative swamp. And the Democrats recognize this, and that's a very massive problem. But beyond that, support for Israel being entirely exhausted is now a reality here in the United States, and it's a fast approaching reality. So that's what leads me up to this other story here that I wanted to cover. Yes, this is a symbolic win for House Democrats. It doesn't really mean anything for now, because Trump will just veto it and push forward in the Middle East. But what's also really happening here, and what's being exposed here now, and how I really want to bring this story into this, centers around how I covered the Benjamin Netanyahu 60 Minutes interview on this channel quite a few weeks ago. Again, be sure to like this stream if you haven't already. It's free to do. Double tap your phone screens. It helps YouTube put this show out in front of more eyes. And YouTube's algorithm, as soon as you criticize these cult-like Zionist scum, they really, really want to try to hold you back. They wanna hold a white brother like me down. So like the stream. It's the least you could do, in all honesty. I mean, the amount of value that I give you, you cheap goyim scum, the amount of value you get on this channel, the amount of truth, the in-depth analysis, the level of brilliance you're receiving from me right now, and you can't even move your fat fucking thumbs off your 300-pound body to double tap your phone screen or hit the thumbs up button, you fat lazy cucks. For the love of God, you should be ashamed of yourself. And if you're not, and you like the stream, also be sure to subscribe right now to American Advocates for more content like this. I go live every single night. So, give me one sec. That leads me, what we just saw with the House of Representatives, the 215 to 208 vote to basically end Trump's power in the Middle East, that's a symbolic win only for now, ties in with the Benjamin Netanyahu 60 Minutes interview that I covered the other week on this channel. And if you'll remember, I said, Benjamin Netanyahu sat down in the 60 Minutes interview and openly acknowledged the severely exhausted and waning support for Israel here in the United States. And then he went on to say that, well, it's actually my idea to begin weaning off of the foreign aid that Israel receives from the United States. We do receive, he admits it, we do receive $3.8 billion annually from the United States. And, this floors them when I tell them this. This always floors the Republicans. And I always say, I've been telling them this now for quite a while. We want to get off that system. We want to move into the future. And we don't want to keep accepting American money. And I went over that live and I covered that. And I said, well, here's what's actually happening. Benjamin Netanyahu, first of all, is saving face. It's a power play. It's Benjamin Netanyahu as the Prime Minister of Israel saying, well, actually, it's Israel who doesn't need you Americans anymore. We're going to move on. And then I also went on to say, and always, as always with these people, the elites, you have to read in between the lines. And you have to be searching for the truth in order to be able to deduce what's actually happening. Because the truth is always hidden in the various words that they say. It's never the full sentence with them. People always take these statements at face value. And that's not how to do it. Look at the actions behind the scenes and then re-examine the words that were said, and then you'll figure out what they actually mean. And you have to understand, a lot of these people, these Zionists, these elites, they think they're smarter than you. And they actually are cocky about that. And they get their rocks off by openly speaking about what they're actually doing, but cleverly disguising it, using poetic words and using these tricky statements that have double meanings. And they get their rocks off by that. It's a thrill to them to think, I can just speak my plans out loud, but I'll do it in a clever way that goes right over the heads of the average everyday 85 IQ goy. And they laugh about this. And so that's what I was warning about the last time when I covered Benjamin Netanyahu's 60 Minutes interview. It was nothing to celebrate when he said he wanted to get Israel off of our $3.8 billion of annual foreign aid funding to Israel. It's nothing to celebrate. It's always bad news. And here's the bad news. Reading in between the lines is crucial because now we understand. It's not about publicly declaring that they don't need the U.S. Before we can force them out, because they see the writing on the wall, right? And that's why Benjamin Netanyahu was saying it. In the same interview, he holds up a cell phone and says, Israel has lost a lot of support with the Americans because of this. And he holds up his cell phone. And that means, of course, he's talking about social media. He's talking about the fact that we are truly in the age of information. It spreads the truth as a result of being in this age spreads faster than what they were able to anticipate. They can't control it properly enough to suppress the truth, which is why TikTok is being sold to Zionists who will suppress the truth on that platform. But they can't be everywhere, and they don't own everything. And so he acknowledges in the same interview what's happening and then says he wants to pull off of our foreign aid. It's because he sees the writing on the wall, and again, he wants to save some face publicly. But behind the scenes is the reality. And behind the scenes, we are now learning, and I've been meaning to cover this for a few days now. But it's one of those topics where it's like I keep trying to save it for last, and then by the time I get to the point, it's like I've been live for an hour and a half, time to get off, and so we're doing it now first. Behind the scenes, what's happening in the House's latest 2027, the year 2027 defense bill, the NDAA, is now a provision that will fuse the United States and Israeli militaries together. It's Section 224 of the NDAA. You can look it up for yourself. And it's proposing what would be open joint weapons productions, shared research and development, integration across AI, cyber autonomous systems, and directed energy weapons. It even proposes in Section 224 of the NDAA, it proposes what's referred to as data fusion. And this means U.S. military data, our U.S. military data, our U.S. military intel, all of it would become Israeli military data. We would be sharing all of our secrets, all of our behind the scenes operation information with Israel. This is an actual proposal taking place. It's Section 224 of the NDAA. It's been exposed now. Thomas Massie exposed it. You can see why he was primaried in Kentucky just the other week. You can see why Miriam Adelson was eagerly writing a check for tens of millions of dollars to support Ed Galrain and primary Thomas Massie, because Thomas Massie won't vote for he wouldn't vote for the 2027 House Defense Bill when he learns about stuff like this. And the problem is Section 224 is not something the Goyim are privy to. They don't want you knowing about that. They just want you to know that it's a defense bill and that we have to spend more on our defense for our national security to keep us safe, and that Thomas Massie voted against it. That's what would happen. That's the typical narrative. And that's why he was primaried. It's because he sees stuff like Section 224 and he says, well, of course I'm all in favor of funding our national defense, but what the fuck is Section 224? What's going on there? And he'll say no. And then they'll say Trump wants to spend money on our defense bill, and Thomas Massie isn't MAGA. Thomas Massie votes with Democrats. He votes against Republicans. This is why that happens. Stop everything, though. Before I continue on with this, I want to recognize, this is a new super chatter. I don't recognize you, but I appreciate it nonetheless. A super chat tariff for $5 from Yo-Yo Duh 9775, and he says, who would buy an iPhone 17 after seeing what happened in Lebanon in 2024? Well, and that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because you know what? Let's go over it one more time before I keep moving on here. Appreciate you, by the way, for the $5. Thank you for the $5 super chat tariff to help balance out the chat deficit. But let's go over it again real fast. What does Section 224 of the NDAA propose when it comes to joining the U.S. and Israeli militaries together? Joint weapons production, shared research and development, an integration across all AI, cyber autonomous systems, and directed energy. And it proposes data fusion. And yes, you're spot on, by the way. The pager incidents with Israel and how we'll give them some props. That was an operation that they were patient enough, by the way, to set up for years. They took years to implement the pager incident. And they Benjamin Netanyahu has alluded in the past, I believe it's Netanyahu or perhaps it's some foreign minister for the Israeli parliament who's mentioned it, that our cell phones are not exempt from that either. So spot on with that super chat tariff, and I appreciate it. Thank you. But moving on from that, so Section 224 of the NDAA, not moving on from that, but moving back into it, really, this is what I wanted to bring to tie all of this together. This is the real agenda now. And this is what it means to read in between the lines, which is, again, what I'm here to do and why you should like the stream right now if you haven't already, because it's free to do. You don't have to pay $5 super chat tariffs like some of my awesome viewers, but liking the stream is free and it still helps out this channel a lot. And I am here to deliver the truth and read in between the lines for you so you can pass this information on to your dumb friends and then you sound like the smart one. Also, subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this, because the real agenda is always what's in between the lines. So publicly, Benjamin Netanyahu says, well, actually, I want to wean Israel off of American foreign funding. We don't need American foreign aid. I think Israel doesn't need $3.8 billion. And a lot of people say, ha, that's a victory. People think they're smart, and they say, see, I can analyze that. Benjamin Netanyahu sees the writing on the wall, and he thinks, oh, I should just get out in front of it. That's the conclusion most people come to if they think they're in the know. And they leave it at that, and they say, that's a white pill. He's accepting defeat by acknowledging it and saying, well, Israel wants to wean themselves off of our money. No, it's more than that. Why do they want to wean themselves off of our money? Because they want to deepen the ties behind the scenes to the point of where the money is irrelevant. Understand something. Israel, of course knows they're losing their grip on America. They're more unpopular than ever, spanning across all generations, even losing 9% favorability with the boomers, who are the dumbest, most psyop generation to have ever existed. Even less popular with Xers. Millennials, they're under 25% popularity with millennials, and with Gen Z, they're under 15% popularity now. The young generations won't tolerate this, but their response to all of this is not to actually let go of America like Benjamin Netanyahu alluded to doing in the 60 Minutes interview. That's what Benjamin Netanyahu publicly said to make you believe it so you don't look into it further. But behind the scenes, they want Section 224 of the NDAA. This is them tightening their grip against our will, by the way, while they still hold the boomers who are in charge of our political system, who still overwhelmingly support Israel. Yes, 9% boomers in the boomer demographic, Israel is 9% less popular now than it was 3 years ago, but it's only 9%. The boomers still overwhelmingly worship and love and adore Israel and Zionism. And they're still overrepresented in our American political system, and that will change in 2028. These are the final 3 years where that's the reality. And so while the boomers are in charge and are held captive currently from years of being psyoped from our education system here in America and from the Schofield Bible, a bastardization of the Bible, not authentic whatsoever. All of this ideology keeps the boomers enslaved to Zionism and to Israel. They're overrepresented, they're in charge, but the future is obviously not going to be this way. They see the writing on the wall. So while the boomers are being held captive and in control, Israel comes in while publicly stating we don't need America's money anymore. They come in to now strengthen ties behind the scenes in such a way where the money won't even matter. This is being compared to and referred to as a marriage of militaries and of governments. A marriage. Essentially, Israel has looked at us. We are the whore. We are the whore of Babylon, really. If you think about it, Greater Israel is basically just the reestablishment of the Babylonian territories, and who's the cheap whore being used to assist them in this project? That would be us. That's the United States. And what do you do with a whore? Well, you either dispose of it once its usefulness has run out, which is a reality I've always said Israel is very likely to do if they ever emerge as a true superpower. And I've gone over all of the reasons why we would actually turn into a potential competitor for Israel if they achieve the Greater Israel nation. We would become a competitor. There'd be no reason for them to support us anymore. So they would either dispose of us after they've used us as the whore that we are for them, or in this case, they've decided, well, maybe we marry them. Maybe we marry the whore. They sure do. Which is even funnier. We're not even a whore if you think about it. We're more like a slut. Because a whore at least gets paid. A whore gets used, but at least it gets paid. And what do? Well, we pay them. We get used by them, and we pay them. So we just love getting fucked by Israel so much that we've decided not only can you use us, but we'll pay you. So we're actually more like a slut. We're like the slut of Babylon, not the whore, because we just enjoy it for some reason. But nevertheless, Israel has decided to marry us, and that's their answer. And what is a marriage? Marriage is binding. Marriage, marriage is the unification of two people into what the Bible refers to as what? One flesh. How can you separate what God has combined? That's the whole idea of marriage. It's a biblical covenant. And that's why I think, sadly, not to bastardize marriage or the biblical covenant, what God deems to be a holy union between two people, because that is its own thing. But proverbially speaking here, as an analogy, Israel is pushing to marry the United States. They're losing control. The whore has wandering eyes. It's becoming just a little bit too self-invested. And so what do? You put a ring on it. And you say, no, you're mine. You're not going anywhere. And this is what Israel is doing or trying to do right now. While many of the captive politicians, funded by AIPAC, controlled by the Zionist movement and the elites and the big donors, are trying to push this forward right now. And that's what's happening. One flesh forever. And a divorce would be very painful. And that's the idea. And what we really want to focus on here, and what I really want to say about this as a proud American nationalist on this channel, a Christian American nationalist, I want to say this openly, and it's treason. This is treasonous, by the way. Like, that's what this is. And why is that? Because Israel is a foreign government. Israel is not an American colony in the Middle East. Israel is not even part of NATO. Israel is literally a foreign country. They're not our greatest ally. They've spied on us in the past. They've attacked us in the past, if you know about the USS Liberty, which by now most people do. It's actually one of the more cliched and overrepresented conspiracy theory stories out there that have turned out to be true. But they've attacked us in the past. They've spied on us in the past. In my opinion, they have no doubt blackmailed many of our politicians and political figures in the past. And they are the most prevalent threat to our way of life and our political system as we know it. And what happened with Thomas Massie made that evident. What's going on with the Iran war right now made that evident. And if you don't see it, I can't help you. If you don't see it, you're the horse I lead to water that won't drink. And you just need to die of dehydration then, so that the rest of us can move on and move forward in the direction we know we need to move in. But they're not NATO, they're a foreign country, and we don't need Israel at all. At all. We are responsible for their very existence. Without us, they are nothing. We give them everything, and they take from us as much as they can. But in addition to that, because they're a foreign country, you have to understand, Section 224 proposes joint weapons productions, shared research and development, and integration across AI. Data centers are popping up all across America right now, and anti-Semitism laws are emerging in states like Florida and Texas from the GOP. I'm a conservative, and I'm here to tell you the GOP has become what the woke left was under Biden. It's the same censorship laws, just protecting a different movement. And these data centers are emerging, and it's not about popping up data centers for efficiency's sake, although yes, they are popping up, which will allow AI to replace even more human jobs by default. But when you understand who Peter Thiel is, and what they want from JD Vance and big tech's plan in general, then you know that even will play a part as well. All these data centers, the surveillance state that could be coming our way if we don't collectively develop the consciousness needed as human beings. Not even when it comes to, listen, I will never be a Democrat or a liberal, ever. And we must fight liberalism, in my opinion, as conservatives. That being said, at the end of the day, we are human beings. And there are two causes right now as Americans that are bipartisan issues above all else. And that is Israel's foreign influence in our political system and AI data centers and the development of AI in general. And all of this is happening under this Trump administration right now. And that's why I say Trump forfeited his mandate and why I say he's betrayed MAGA. He goes against all of these ideas, and everything that's being done right now is not to our benefit. It's the opposite. It's going to harm us in the future. So integration across AI, gee, I wonder what could possibly go wrong with a foreign warmongering government that believes we're the lesser than and goyim scum, and that's pushing for their politicians like Randy Fine to push out anti-Semitism hate speech laws. And now AI will track all of this under Palantir in the future, and they will pre-profile you based off of your speech to deem you a threat or otherwise. What could go wrong with Israel having access to that? And that's why this is a traitorous act from the GOP, and it is pure treason. No foreign government should have any access to any of this. They should not have open access to our research and development. They should not have joint access to weapons production with us, integration across our AI development, which I protest largely anyway. Nor should they have access to our directed energy or data fusion, no shared intel, none of it. We don't even give that to NATO allies to that degree. We selectively share. And that's the most Israel could hope for, and that's the only reasonable thing Israel should be expecting. But because they see the writing on the wall, now they publicly say, yeah, we don't need your money, and that's because it's going to be a shared bank account. They only care about our military, and they only care about using it to fulfill their end goal. And they will still dispose of us like the whore that we are, despite the marriage. They'll be the ones to divorce us after they've used us, after they've proverbially married us to weaponize us in the Middle East to fulfill their goals. They'll divorce us and dispose of us still. This doesn't change anything. But what they're doing is they're baking it in and prolonging it. They're setting it up for the future to make the divorce impossible to achieve from them when the young generations get in charge and actively seek it out. And that's what's happening right now. Section 224 of the NDAA, look it up. It's crucial. Treason, that's what it is. Now, I'm going to move on to the next story here. Henry Nowak, an 18-year-old British kid who was stabbed to death by a brown Sikh invader in the UK. Foreign Sikh Indian brown invader invading the Western world, a story that many people are familiar with. The body cam footage emerged recently. I've been tweeting about it on my Twitter for a while, so we're going to get into that story. The lessons we can learn here in America from the Henry Nowak situation, because there's a lot of lessons we need to take from that, and there's a lot of steps here in America we need to take going forward to ensure that what happened with Henry in Britain doesn't happen here in America, because America has always been an extension, and truthfully it started off as a colony to begin with of the European nations. So what we see play out overseas in Europe and Britain, and to some degrees even Australia, New Zealand, etc., Canada too for that matter, we can expect similar circumstances happening right here in America as well. So I'm going to go over that in 1 second, this Henry Nowak situation. But before I do that, please be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. I go live every single night. And yeah, that's it for you. That's the story with the Middle East in wraps there. The Israel is moving to marry our militaries together. And it goes against where we are moving forward as a nation, as young generations that recognize how problematic Israel is. And it's a massive problem, and it's treason. It is literally treason for any of our politicians to be supporting it. I'll take a look at a few chats here. Take a look at a few chats here before moving on to the Henry Nowak story and the lessons we can learn from him in regards to nationalism and race in general, to be honest with you. Alyssa Taylor says, I low-key agree. War happens and the arms and supply game just prints money. Major economic boost. This is true. It's called the military-industrial complex, and it's headed up. It's the military-industrial complex literally exists because of Israel. That's why it exists. So Very true. And there's a reason why Israel always profits during wartime, while America or any other country involved in war doesn't. What are we seeing? Our inflation go up. We're seeing our dollar value get crushed. We're seeing gas go up, etc. All of this. Meanwhile, in Israel, their inflation went down back in March, and their shekel's doing better than ever. And that's for a reason, too. Thai Life American says Israel is a terrorist apartheid occupation. I agree. Alyssa Taylor says, I'm telling you, when war hits, the weapons and logistics industries rake in tons of cash. It basically carries the economy. It's doing it right now, Alyssa. It's doing it literally right now in our stock market. We keep seeing the S&P 500 hitting new highs. Meanwhile, our inflation continues to rise and our cost of living gets worse. And this is the same pattern we saw play out under President Biden for different reasons, but with the result being the same. I called it out then I'm a conservative, so I called out what was happening under Biden, and I was very raw about it back then before I even had this YouTube channel. We're going to call it out now too, because it's the same concept playing out. And what happened under Biden was inflation soared to 9.1%. And Trump is not exonerated from that, by the way, because that was during COVID, and Trump's actual policies that he initiated before leaving office and giving over the keys to Biden were responsible for that to varying degrees. Biden didn't make it better. He managed it horribly and made it worse. So they're both really guilty. And we saw the inflation hit 9.1%. We saw Biden pump the jobs market full of these are fake government jobs. Also, he could claim he was creating new jobs and try to boost optimism in the economy, which turned out to be a disaster and a problem that Trump had to solve. And then Trump looks like the bad guy for cutting the government jobs, but it was actually necessary. But nevertheless, under Biden, we saw it, and then we saw the stock market do what? It got better. It hit new highs, while inflation hit 9.1%. We were going to the grocery store every 2 weeks back in 2022 and 2023, and the products we were buying were shrinking in their packaging while staying the same price. And then over the course of several more weeks, not only did they shrink, but then they got more expensive because of inflation, while the stock market continued to go up. This always, almost always, not always, but oftentimes, I should say, signifies a transfer of wealth from the low and middle class to the upper class elites. And it was happening under Biden, and I called it out then, and it's happening right now. The S&P 500 is hitting record highs continuously, while gas gets worse, inflation goes up, our cost of living gets worse, the housing market still sucks, the economy and affordability for lower and middle class Americans is still bad, if not worse than ever almost at this point. And the stock market is doing what? It's going up. And that is, again, a transfer of wealth taking place right now because of the military-industrial complex largely. And yes, when you look at which stocks are performing, it's the ones that are centered around defense and military and big tech, AI, etc., that are overperforming, so much so that they force the market to do better. And all of the wealthy investors out there profit off of this by taking our money that we are spending more of due to inflation and investing that money that they get from us into these stocks to fund all of this. And in doing so, they increase their wealth while we lose ours. It is, again, another wealth transfer. Zeke186 says, what up, big dog? What's up, man? Appreciate you being here, Zeke. Joe Schmo. Oh, hey, Joe Schmo. Thanks for your comment on the video, too. I appreciate you. He says, UK should definitely revolt. Yes. The Waits Experience says, did you see my last comment? No, I didn't, actually. Hey, thanks for the gift, too, Zeke186. Thank you for that gift. I appreciate that. Stop everything. Another $5 super chat from Yo-Yo. Thank you for that, man. That's your second $2 super chat tariff, which helps balance out the chat deficit of stupidity from a lot of these people. And he says, I'm surprised you self-label as a conservative. You seem more sophisticated than the average conservative. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, listen, you're about to see how fiscally and socially conservative I am when I discuss this Henry Nowak situation. I am an American Christian nationalist. I'm very proud of my heritage, of my country, of my religion, of all of it. But MAGA cultists are MAGA cultists, right? They're just idiots. And I do pride myself in separating from the cult. I don't worship any one man. I'm not loyal to Trump. Trump, if anything, I've said this before. Nobody owes their loyalty to Trump as an American. He owes his loyalty to us. That's the point of the presidential position. Why? Because we put them in that position of power. We do. We put them there. They owe us. I know they always say, well, he got shot in the head and, he almost died and, he suffered a lot to run. On principle, objectively, I can acknowledge that. It doesn't matter, though. We're the reason he's there. We're the reason he's in that position. He's supposed to be the ultimate representative of us, of we the people. And so I don't owe him loyalty. He's not a king. He's not some monarch. He's the president. He's my representative. He owes me. And that's how that's supposed to work. So, but I appreciate that nonetheless. Hey, if you're not conservative, if you're a liberal, you might wind up getting a little upset here because at the end of the day, it's time to discuss Henry Nowak, and this is where I make it very known and very felt for the chat. I rant on Trump all the time, and I'm aware what this does is it draws in a lot of people who are critical of Trump and oftentimes are, as a result, liberal or Democrat. And you're welcome to be here. But when it's time to discuss domestic issues, when it's time to discuss sensitive issues, when it's time to discuss America's well-being and future from a social standpoint, make no bones about it, I'm a social conservative. So if you can tolerate that, by all means stay. And if you can't, I will not take any offense to you unsubscribing and never coming back. Because this is important stuff. Howard Clegg, 6497 with the $2 super chat tariff. Man, you guys are on fire today with these super chats. I really appreciate those. Good show, he says. Thank you, man. I appreciate you. Thank you as well for all your comments. For those who don't know, Howard Clegg is our resident boomer, 40-year Army veteran targeting officer, and I love this guy because when I'm giving my Iran war analysis, which I've been more right about than wrong, again, why you should subscribe right now to American Advocates and like the stream by double tapping your phone screen, Howard Clegg comes in and backs me up and says, well, I'm a 40-year Army targeting vet and a strategical mind for the military, and you're smart and you know what you're talking about, and blah, 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 and I love it. I absolutely love it. So thank you for that. And then he pays me on top of it. What a guy. What a guy. What a guy. Now, he's a boomer, so he's had a whole lifetime to generate wealth. So it's like, yeah, I'll take your $2, please, as you should be giving. I'm just playing with you. As you should be giving us poor millennials money. But seriously, thank you, Howard. So let's move on to this Henry Nowak situation for the top story here. Now, for those who aren't familiar here, what's actually happening with Henry Nowak. Henry Nowak, this is an incident that actually happened, I believe, late last year, over in the United Kingdom, and it involved an Englishman in Britain who was an 18-year-old college student, and he was walking around in his own home country and found himself in a situation, one way or another, where he wound up being stabbed to death by a Sikh man. Now, a Sikh, I believe, is basically an Indian Muslim, an Indian who practices Islam, or an Indian who has a religion that is similar to Islam. They've adapted it pretty much, and they share some sort of a culture like this. And the Sikh man was carrying around basically a knife, which is not supposed to be allowed in Britain. But when you're a Sikh and you have a ceremonial knife, and it's part of your religion, you're then allowed to bypass British laws because of your race and because of your religion, and now you can carry a knife, unlike most people living in Britain. People like Henry, for instance, who famously can't own a gun, for sure, but now, as the UK begins to experience ridiculous levels of knife crimes and stabbings, they've now doubled down on all of this, and they've basically said, yeah, no knives either. You can't own knives. And so Henry's unarmed, and one thing leads to another. We're not exactly sure. I couldn't find exactly what happens, but Henry winds up being stabbed by a Sikh man. His name was Digwa. What was his last name again? Hang on, I had that pulled up here. I had it pulled up somewhere anyway. This ridiculous foreign invader. His last name's Digwa, and apparently they walk by each other. One thing leads to another, and the Sikh man with the last name Digwa pulls his knife out, stabs Henry 5 times. The police get called, the British police, and they show up to the scene, and Henry Nowak at this point is laying on the ground, kind of like underneath a car in a driveway somewhere, because the body cam footage was released just about 2 days ago, and that's why this story is resurfacing. He's laying on the ground, pretty motionless, but still alive. And the police approach and they begin interviewing Digwa and looking at Henry laying on the ground. And they basically ask what happens. Digwa, the Sikh man, immediately claims that Henry was racist. And so, hearing that, the police immediately move over to Henry and arrest him. They put him in handcuffs. They put his hands behind his back, all while Henry is saying, I've been stabbed. I've been stabbed. Please help me. I can't breathe. We get the sadly now iconic words, I can't breathe. Only this time he actually means it, unlike the previous incidents where we all know those famous words came from. And so he says all of this, and the police, on the body cam footage that's released, featuring 2 officers who are white, like Henry was, the male officer says, you've been stabbed. I don't think you have been, mate. And then he tells Henry, give me your other hand, and then arrests him. And at this point, Henry is then face down on the pavement of the driveway, arrested, begging for help, and saying he can't breathe, and then dies. And all the while, a female officer at one point says, well, he said he's been stabbed, we've got to check him. The male officer actually says, no. And that stops the female officer from actually checking the condition of Henry Nowak, who then, of course, dies. And it takes them about 3 minutes to determine, actually. At one point, you hear the female officer say, his pupils aren't even responding anymore to our flashlights. They're not even responding to the lights. And they check his pulse, and you can see the color of his hands have lost pigmentation. They're pale. They are like ghostly white. And Henry's unresponsive, and he's declared dead. They get him to the hospital, and he's dead on arrival. Gone. And this incident we had heard about last year. It caused a little bit of outrage, but the body cam footage of the officers was suppressed for quite a while. And ultimately, what we've now wound up seeing here is that Digwa, because of the political pressure now being applied to the UK courts, Digwa has now been sentenced to 21 years to life, but only after all of this became a massive debacle. And this is really what I want to discuss today. What lessons can we learn from this, as we have now seen the horrifying body cam footage from 2 white British national police officers. These are British nationals who are police officers that arrived on the scene, and because the word "he's a racist" was literally spoken by Digwa, the brown foreign invader Sikh man, because these words were spoken, immediately these officers treat Henry, the stabbing victim who dies, they treat him as a suspect, and they essentially literally brush off his pleas for help. The male officer literally doubting him when he says, I've been stabbed. Why? Because the police officers were told he was a racist. And so what's going on here? What can we learn from this? Well, just in America specifically, not collectively for the West, the Western nations across the world need to learn from this, as well as America. We need to all learn this, because again, what happens over in Britain or in France or in Germany or up in Canada or in Australia, what happens there is often a prelude or very similar to what's about to happen or currently happening to varying degrees over in America. And so what we learn first and foremost here, we have to understand what this actually is. And Henry Nowak being killed by a brown Sikh foreigner in Henry's own homeland, being England, Britain, is not a glitch. This is not an act. This is not like an unforeseen, accidental consequence of mass immigration of third world countries into these first world nations. This is not some unintended result. This is deliberate. This is a design of the system. And how do we know that? Well, it's because it's all part of what's called the Kalergi strategy. That's what's on display. And it's a historical pattern that has played out several times over again with other past empires. This has happened in Rome. This has happened in many other empires that rose to prominence and then were eventually on the decline and collapsed altogether. Foreign invaders are amongst one of the most prominent indicators of a declining empire or of a declining civilization. But this is being done intentionally. And that's what we need to understand first. It's not even an isolated incident or unique phenomenon occurring in the UK, by the way. This is happening in every first world Western civilization to varying degrees right now. And that's how you know it's intentional. Take a look at all of the homelands and countries of origin of where these foreign immigrants and these illegal aliens come from. And look at the demographic of what's going on there. Look at their immigration to see. What you'll notice is they are eager to get to countries like England and France and Germany and America and Canada. But people from America and Canada and France and England and Germany are not flooding in to countries like India or Pakistan. They're not moving deliberately to countries like Iran or Mexico or Africa or China. And in some cases, it's because some of these countries have very rigid and strict immigration policies, believe it or not, and they wouldn't allow that anyway. But even if they did, I guarantee you, you would not see a mass migration of white people, of white Europeans, eager to live in any of those countries. But conversely, what you see are tons of third world people eager to move and take advantage of the system that has been set up deliberately to undermine Western civilization. And they're eager to fill these lands. And this is being weaponized against the Western civilization and first world nations right now, and it's being done on purpose. The Kalergi strategy is real. And so if you can't understand that, then you can't move forward with my explanation here. But this is very intentional. And that's the foundation of all of this, is understanding this. Understanding that specifically in America, where I'm the most educated on, we've seen the same system be set up intentionally here. Starting in truth with Emma Lazarus in 1883, the Jewish poet who wrote her poem, The New Colossus, that ultimately wound up being engraved on our Statue of Liberty about 20 years later in 1903, and was done so to intentionally change the symbolic meaning of our Statue of Liberty from a statue that symbolized the freedom and power of our republic and of our country, and changed it to a meaning of a woman welcoming immigrants from all lands. And then in addition to that, we get the Russian poet who wrote the book The Melting Pot, who goes on to describe America as a melting pot of civilizations and of ethnicities that all come together and harmonize, and the ethnicities, the varying immigrants from around the world come in, and they all melt into the American melting pot, according to the theory of that Russian writer, the Russian Jewish writer, The Melting Pot, which is a lie. That's not how it plays out. But all of this is used then to put forward acts like the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 and the Immigration Act of 1990 by George H.W. Bush. And these were all done intentionally. And what we've seen is massive demographic shifts in our country ever since. And I'm going to get into a little bit more of that later, but it all goes without saying that it's being done intentionally. And that's why, most importantly, the messaging that I want to put forward here, and the first and most important lesson that we can take from the Henry Nowak situation over in the UK, is that nationalism is crucial for the survival and success of nations. Nationalism. Thank you for the $2 super chat tariff, Michael Cox. Appreciate you. Nationalism is vital, and that's the first lesson here. But nationalism for predominantly white and Western countries is not only discouraged, but it's also demonized. And that's the first hurdle that we have to jump over as Americans, or that the British need to jump over. It looks like they're getting ready to make that jump if you pay attention to just how active they are now in their own country. We're seeing mass protests in the street. We're seeing white people rising up, flying their Union Jack flags, protesting protesting the invasion of these foreign illegal aliens in their country, protesting the very obvious and blatant demographic shift occurring in Britain and in the UK right now. And now, over the result of this body cam being released, there were massive protests taking place in the streets of Britain yesterday. So it looks like they're getting ready to make the jump, but they're hanging on more of a thread right now, by more of a thread than we are currently here in America. Things are still just a little too comfortable for us to be doing what's happening in Britain right now. But that's really the first thing happening right now, and understanding that, again, for if you're in a white nation, if you're in a first world nation, and you talk about being a nationalist, that is instantly demonized. You are demonized for even saying that word. And that's why we need to move forward with it regardless. And we need to speak openly about such problems. And we need to speak openly about concepts like nationalism and embrace it openly and proudly. We must destroy the narrative that nationalism is demonized for white people, because it's also by design. And you'll recognize this. There is no criticism for black nationals. There's no criticism for Mexicans who fly their flags in our Los Angeles city streets in protest of Trump and in protest of ICE and illegal immigrants. They fly their flags and they're nationalists for Mexico while living in our country. And there's no demonization for that. They're allowed to be proud of their country culture and of their way of life. They're allowed to be proud of all of that, and they're allowed to be Mexican nationalists. And what you'll see with black people is they'll celebrate their country of origin, where they can trace back their genealogy to Africa, and they're allowed to be proud of that. And the Chinese people, they're extreme nationalists. They're raised to be that way, and you'll never see it demonized. It's expected, actually. But when a European nation, when white people decide that they're going to be nationalists, they're going to be an American nationalist like I am, well, all of a sudden, that comes with all kinds of misnomers and all kinds of stereotypes. Oh, you must be a neo-Nazi. Oh, you must be one of those fake Christians. Oh, you can't be serious. You must be a white supremacist. I'm an American nationalist. Hi, this is American Advocates. I'm of German and British descent, but I am a fifth-generation American nationalist. I am a Christian and proud, and I live and love in my country. I live in my country, America, and I love it. Nice to meet you. It's really that simple. And that's what needs to emerge first and foremost. White people and Western nations uniting for a cause is the only thing that terrifies the elites. And that's why they demonize it so harshly. They're not concerned about Africans rising up. First of all, it won't happen. They war with each other. They kill each other. They're an undeveloped nation. They're exploited for their diamond wealth and resources, and they're not developed enough to even resist it. They're not worried about that. They're not worried about Indians rising up and becoming too nationalistic and unifying. Doesn't matter. They're not worried about Mexicans doing that either. In fact, the Mexicans, when they unite, they tend to form what? Cartels and sell drugs. They're not worried about that. That's a good thing for them. Those drugs seep across our border and kill more Americans. It's actually good. But they certainly aren't going to be able to ever unite in any sort of anti-establishment, anti-elite system and fight back. Which ethnicity or which group of people, which demographic terrifies them? What's the real threat? It's white people, European nations uniting together and rising up together in a unified manner to push back and fight the system. Because every time that happens, history is made. Rome was built. The Crusades took place. Colonization of these American lands. Colonization itself, which is demonized and shouldn't be. We tamed these savage lands. We eradicated the indigenous savages of these lands that scalped our people, that raped our women, that murdered and sacrificed our children. And we've colonized it and turned it into the most prominent, powerful first world nation in the world. And that's what white people do. We rise up and we rebel against the establishment. It's why America was founded. And it's also why America separated over time even further from our origin, over a tax, over a 3% tax. And that's what terrifies the elites, and that's why all of this has been demonized. And that's why we are now in the position that we're in. This is a Zionist psyop system that has been set up. Emma Lazarus, Israel Zwangli, I believe is his name, the Russian book writer of The Melting Pot. Lyndon Baines Johnson, 1965's Immigration and Nationality Act. George H.W. Bush, the 1990 Immigration Act that ushered in the H-1B visas. And in addition to all of this, the liberal education system, which was rewritten by Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and in many cases also was influenced by, again, Zionism and controlled by liberalism, which is the ultimate tool of Zionism. Liberalism spreads concepts like feminism and globalism and sexual liberation, and it destroys the family unit. It destroys the nuclear family. It demoralizes men. It keeps men weak, American men. It keeps us weak. And over the course of time, the liberal education system was overhauled and radically altered to begin teaching and instilling what we now refer to as white guilt. Colonization was demonized. Our Christian religion has been ridiculed. Our values and way of life have been laughed at. We've been told we have no culture. How many times have you heard that as an American? You're an American, you have no culture. You like hamburgers? That's from Hamburg, Germany. You like hot dogs? Where do those come from? You like pasta, spaghetti? That's from Italy. That's what they'll tell you. They don't talk about NASCAR. They don't talk about American football. They don't talk about WWE wrestling, Hollywood, which some of it is also even a problem to begin with, in all honesty. But they ignore the actual real culture. They ignore everything that's special about America, and they want you to believe that you have no identity. They want you to believe there is no culture in America. And they want you to continue pushing forward and believing in white guilt. You're a colonizer. You're scum. You destroy people's way of life, and you replace it with these Western societies that you claim are free. I mean, I look around at our modern cities that were built by Italian bricklayers and that were built by German ditch diggers, that were built by British people and Europeans alike, these lands settled by Europeans, and I see greatness. That's what I see. I see 20-story skyscrapers, 40-story skyscrapers, and then I look around at all the third world countries where a lot of these immigrants come from, and I go, and what do they have? AK-47s, death, child warfare, child slavery in general. All of that still exists. And that's what's happening. Now, we also see, feminism, globalism, the LGBTQ movement, all of it takes hold, all to demoralize us and targets us. And specifically, we're going to call it a spade here. It's to target men, and then even more specifically, it's to target white men. And that's the agenda at play right now. This neutralizes their perceived possible threat of us, and it allows the elites to push forward with globalism, which is what's being played out right now before our very eyes. Globalism. That's what's happening right now. Stop everything, though. Yo-Yo Duh, $97.75 with a $10 super chat tariff. My God, dude. You're a big spender, man. I really appreciate you. I hope I'm not losing you here at this point. I would almost feel good. Like, listen, you've given me money. If you've turned out to be like a super liberal or something, then I would actually feel guilty that you've given me now like so much money. So I hope that's not the case. But he says, which average white people ever benefited from colonialism? The colonial empires had to keep wages low for their inhabitants in order to avoid trade deficits with their colonies. Which average white people ever benefited from colonialism? I did. I'm a fifth generation American, and I love living in this country, and I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And colonialism is what created America. Settlers created America, but colonialism is how we established it. We established America as a colony of Europe, and from there we progressed. We took the land, we conquered some of it, we purchased a lot of it, and now we have America, and I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I am genuinely proud to be an American, and despite the state that America is currently in, I know what's causing that state and what's causing it to become this way. And it's not Europeans, it's certainly not white people that are causing this either. Nor, in my opinion, is it really even the black heritage Americans that also have an equal stake to claim here. A lot of this is not a white supremacy rant of mine whatsoever as an American. I believe other cultures, other people do have a right to live here. But I'm going to get into the demographics as well and what the real red pill is for what the original demographics were for America before 1965, because a lot of people are not aware of that. But the bottom line is colonialism benefits most lands. Every first world nation was colonized by Europeans, by white people, and they're first world nations. You can go to Central Africa right now where Europeans had no interest in living, and they live in huts and they throw spears. And they are enslaved, and now they dig diamonds for wealthy nations. You don't see that here in America. Now, you can argue about economics and you can argue about the cost of living. And I criticize Trump and I criticize the neoconservative movement as well as I criticize liberals for varying different social issues. And we have plenty of problems here. But at the end of the day, even with my rising cost of living, I wake up every day with no fear of losing my head, no fear of my throat being slit, no fear of being ripped off the streets and forced to dig ditches to look for diamonds. I live in no fear of being killed for my religion, and that's the way it needs to stay. And that's what Europeans do. We come to these lands, we tame them, we Christianize them, and we bring in morality and we bring in ethics. So that's my answer to you. Also, Yo-Yo Duh says, with another $5 super chat tariff, he says, no doubt it was a great accomplishment and helped whites in the Americas, but I think it hurt the average people within the British Empire. Yes, well, so there was obviously a split between America and Britain at the time. So what we're talking about here is the Catholic Church over in Britain, the monarchy over in Britain, the problems in the political system over in Britain as they were losing their way to some degree, and we ultimately decided the settlers, I should say, decided they need to leave. And eventually, of course, originally this was exploration. These lands were discovered first, then established and settled, and then the split occurs, everything else. But you're not completely wrong in the fact that, yes, over in Britain, it was a disaster for them to lose their colony that was America. But they were their own undoing in that regard. So I'm not saying that every first world country or nation is perfect or should be completely unified. Back on point. Let's see here. Yeah, so they bring all of this in, and really what I want to get to here is the second lesson here. The second lesson, beyond just embracing nationalism as Americans, or as Britons need to embrace nationalism as well, and they're already doing that. Out of desperation at this point. We want to get to that point before we get as desperate as the British people have become. As now they reportedly can't even walk some segments of their own city blocks that have been taken over where their women are raped and their people are stabbed and murdered, as was Henry Nowak. We want to avoid getting to that point. But really what this leads me to is the second lesson to learn here. And this one is even more uncomfortable than discussing the topic of nationalism for most people. Because here's the real red pill for you people, and it's about time we just openly acknowledge this. Race is real. It's real. This colorblind meritocracy nonsense, it's not true. It's a psyop. Race is real. Pattern recognition has credibility to it, and non-compatibility is no longer a theory, it's a fact. And it's a fact that we now know is a fact over years now of a trial of having these third world immigrants come into our country. And in my own personal life, I know good people who come into America, and they're good. They are good people. They learn our language. They pay their taxes, which is not even, I don't even agree with taxes, but if I have to pay them, they should be coming in and paying them, and they do. And they learn our language, they pay their taxes, they work a job, they contribute to our society. And in a perfect world, we would have an immigration system set up that allows that to continue. But the problem is with mass immigration and with illegal immigration, it has been now ruined because of the mass amount of flooding that has changed the way it all works. When you allow a small trickle of people into your country over the course of years, they are forced to assimilate because they are a severe and small minority. And that's how it needs to stay. But beyond that, race is real, and non-compatibility is not a theory. It's not a theory anymore. It's a fact, because what we are seeing is there are for sure entire cultures spanning across the globe that are just not compatible with the West. And every time we try to think otherwise, or pretend otherwise, or turn a blind eye to these problems, we wind up paying the price for it. Henry Nowak paid the ultimate price for it. But beyond Henry Nowak, beyond the ultimate price being paid, we look at states like Michigan with Somalian fraud. Somalia. Why would we ever look at a country like Somalia, and why would we ever conclude, after seeing the conditions of their cities and after learning about their culture and way of life, the abysmal food that they eat, everything down to that, and up to the fact that they are a pirate nation full of warlords and criminals and pirates and crime and disgusting cities, why would we look at that and say, you know what America needs? It needs more Somalians. But for some reason, somewhere up the line, up the chain of command, people have determined this. And then Michigan happens. And then we learn, or Minnesota. Yeah, Minnesota happens. And then we take a look at that and we understand Minnesota has been defrauded by billions of dollars. The Quality Leering Center. By the way, if you're not paying attention, it turns out there was a second Leering Center with the same spelling error opened up by different Somalians who were also defrauding the state of Minnesota and sending the money where? To Somalia. And that's just one example. And that's not compatible. They come here and they're the same pirates here that they were in Somalia, because they're not here to assimilate. They're not here to embrace our American way of life or culture. They are here because, unlike white people who are too afraid, or unlike Americans in general, who demonize the word nationalism and are too afraid to embrace nationalism, many of these immigrants come here and they're very nationalistic, and they love their culture and they love their country. And they're here to take advantage of our country and to take advantage of our way of life, but they have no intent on actually assimilating with it. They will still identify as Iranian, Afghanistan. They'll identify as Middle Eastern. They'll identify as African. They'll identify as Chinese. They'll identify as Japanese, Mexican, Latino. And that's one of the biggest problems. And many of these cultures are just not compatible. Equality, in addition to compatibility and in addition to race being real, the next lie is that equality is a concept that is real or should be worked towards. Equality is a lie. Equality is a lie, and it must be killed off. And that's what makes people uncomfortable. There is no such thing as equality. If there were, then all sports teams right now would be equal. The New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs are playing against each other. If equality were real, there would be no Game 7 nor Game 6. It would just go on infinitely, and they'd all play equal. But that's not how that's going to work. Somebody's better. One team is better. One team is worse. And we will find out. Sports are a great example. So is in general the concept of physical strength or intelligence, which can be measured by the intelligence quotient, the IQ. We know so much about this. There is no equality, not in the tangible world. Now, equality is a wonderful concept in a perfect sunshine and rainbow world, and in God's eyes, we'd like to at least think that all men are created equal. But equality in the real world does not exist. There are CEOs and there are homeless beggars. There are winning sports teams and there are losing sports teams. There are college athletes that go pro, and then there are college athletes that never make it. And that's the reality of life. Life in general is supposed to be set up as a meritocracy. You're supposed to find what you're good at and go after it. And everybody's blessed with some sort of skill and talent. But equality, general across the board equality, is a complete lie. And this ties in with racialism, and it ties in with non-compatibility, and it ties in with nationalism. And beyond that, what we have to understand too is not only is equality a lie, but in addition to all of these truths, white guilt must end. And the term, this will be triggering to some people, the term white pride must also reemerge. And again, it's only demonized The word pride is only demonized when the word white is the prefix to it. Gay pride is wonderful to people. Black pride is outstanding to people. Mexican pride, Latino pride, all of that is great. And then when you say something like white pride, it's, oh my God, what a supremacist, what a racist, I can't believe it. But true American history must be taught, and when that's taught, then we understand why white guilt should be a farce, why nationalism should be the standard, why equality is a lie. Because America is not an idea, contrary to what so many people think. America is a physical place, it's a land, it's a country, and most importantly, America is a people. Not an idea, it's a people. And it was founded by people with an idea, but it was founded by specific people. And this is the key going forward here. America was originally a European colony. The founding fathers all came from pretty much the same spot, from the same origin, place of origin. And before the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 was signed by Lyndon Johnson under the Statue of Liberty, which had the New Colossus poem written on it from Emma Lazarus, a Jewish woman back in 1883, by the way. Before this Immigration and Nationality Act was signed in 1965, over 90% of America was of white European descent. And over 90% of America at that time was also predominantly Christian, or at least identified or embraced Christian values. And what we can see every decade since 1965 is a steady demographic decline. And that's why I said earlier on that this is an intentional strategy, and why Henry Nowak and his death over in Britain is not an accident, or it's not an unforeseen consequence of mass immigration from third world countries. It is a feature of the system over in Britain, and it's the intended result here in the United States as well. Because every 10 years after 1965, we see white people in America. We see Europeans on the decline, down from 90% to 87% around in 1975. In 1985, it was down to something like 83 or 84%. In 1985, it was down to 80% or 78 to 79%. In 1995, it was even lower. In 2005, it was even lower. In 2015, even lower. And now, in 2026, we are at 58%. All in a country that was originally founded as a European colony, settled by Europeans, established by Europeans, created by Europeans, developed by predominantly Europeans or Italians, etc. And our immigration policy pre-1965 was so rigid and strict that we had negative net migration in Mexico. We sent more Mexicans back than we allowed in. We allowed roughly, with our immigration policy pre-1965, most immigrants, meaning 98.5% of them, came from European nations. And now we are at 58%. And that's why I say America is a people, not an idea, not a concept. It's a people. And so the real truth behind all of this is the Kalergi strategy, the intentionality of all of this, Henry Nowak's death, the war on the Western nations, which is very evident, is all by design, because if Europeans cease to be the majority in America, America ceases to exist. America is a people. And that's the real main point here. And the uncomfortable topics of discussing racialism and pattern recognition, and using these to justify a future where we tighten our grip on immigration in the form of a 10 or 15 or 20-year moratorium, where we shut down our borders and semi-isolate from the rest of the world and focus internally on our country, rebuild it, learn to self-sustain more, pull back from China, develop our infrastructure, our supply chains, our manufacturing, fight against AI, and more importantly, embrace the concept of remigration. Not because immigrants are scum, not certainly all of them are, at least. Many good immigrants, some of whom I would be more than happy to allow to stay in my country. I know a lot of good ones. But we must embrace these ideas if our nation is to be saved. And Britain is learning this the hard way right now. Nationalism must be embraced, and it's embraced worldwide by most other prominent countries. It's only the European nations, psyoped with white guilt, psyoped with an anti European message, psyoped with feminism, psyoped with globalism, psyoped with their liberal education system, that has demonized these concepts and then now pushes back against this narrative to their detriment. It was two white police officers in Britain who treated a fellow Brit, Henry Nowak, as a criminal simply because his attacker, who stabbed him to death, accused him of being racist. And this is why nationalism and equality, being a lie, must combine. Because under true nationalism, in the same circumstance where Henry Nowak was stabbed, if Britain was predominantly full of white British people, indigenous people, and people want to rant so much about those indigenous natives that lived in these lands being colonized by us Europeans. That's the rant of the liberal left. Where are they ranting right now about the third worlders entering the United Kingdom right now and colonizing the indigenous Englishmen? Where are those rants? But in a perfect world where the UK is embracing nationalism and proud of their culture and of their heritage, those police would have showed up to Henry Nowak, stabbed 5 times and bleeding to death. And despite Digwa, the Sikh man, saying he's racist, they would have heard Henry say, "Help me, I've been stabbed." And they would have handcuffed Digwa, and they would have given their fellow Englishman in nationalistic spirit the benefit of the doubt as he deserved, being one of them. And they would have handcuffed Digwa right away, and they would have examined Henry Nowak, they would have learned he was stabbed, and they would have rendered aid, possibly saving his life. We're not really sure. I didn't get to look in to see just how bad it was. Maybe he was beyond saving, sadly. But that's how that would have played out. Rather than Henry Nowak dying with his face down in the pavement, bleeding to death, suffocating on his own blood, crying for help, and the last words he was hearing were from the police officer who were reciting their version of his Miranda rights to him. But because over in Britain they fully embraced white guilt and they've denied nationalism, and instead they've embraced the lie of equality and of a colorblind meritocracy, the police there, even more so than the police here, are ultimately afraid of, above all else, being accused of being racist. And so upon hearing the magic words, "he's a racist," they treated their own as the criminal, and he paid the ultimate price for it. And that's the lesson to be learned here. And that's what's happening. It's happening all in the Western countries. Look at the photographs of France 10 years ago, before mass migration really set in. You will see beautiful Paris with manicured bushes and mowed grass and beautiful sidewalks and bicycles for rent and cultural buildings and people walking around with smiles. And now you look at it and you see overgrown grass. You see every bike missing because it's been stolen. The only bike left in the bike rental section is missing its front tire. You see homeless encampment tents set up. You see trash blowing all around Britain. You hear about crime. You hear about women being raped in broad daylight and then being arrested for accusing their rapist of being, or for saying that their rapist, using a racial derogatory slur against their racist rapist. They'll literally say, "My rapist was a blank," and they'll use a racist term. They get arrested. This happened in Britain as well, by the way. It happens now in first world countries. And this is the truth of all of it. And, here's a great example, actually, when I was thinking about this all day today. A sports example of this, in fact. At one point in time, I was at a football event in my old hometown. And this is what nationalism, because, what I've realized with a lot of people who are involved in politics to some degree, they view politics as like sports. Similar to sports. There's the Republicans and the Democrats. It's like going to a football game. There's the Philadelphia Eagles and there's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whatever. Well, I was at a game, and this is what nationalism looks like and how it plays out so naturally when you allow it to. I was at a game, and I'm not saying morally this is right or wrong entirely, but I was at a game and there were fans from the enemy team in the arena. And they sit down and they're wearing their team's jersey, which pisses off pretty much the entire stadium. And over time, it pisses people off, but it's more teasing as always. But over time, people get drunk, they drink. And this, of course, lowers inhibitions. And so some people from my old hometown go over and approach these people from their away town wearing their foreign team's jersey, and they start a fight with them, and they actually assault them first. And these people who are from out of town, they get assaulted first. But what happens? Well, much like in politics, sports is actually similar. The security guards come and they actually restrain the people from out of town and they kick them out. And that may really be reprehensible to a lot of people there, but the bottom line is that's nationalism. And I'm actually happy to hear or see stuff like that. That's how it should be. Those security guards root for the same team of the people who were aggravating and aggroing the people from out of town. But because of that, they come in and they escort the people from out of town away. And this goes on in all kinds of different countries. But here in America, we're the only one. We're the only country, or Western civilizations in general, are the only nation that try to restrict that nature from within us. And we try to, what we would consider to be rising above that in order to be fair, in order to be tolerant. But tolerance is a lie. And nationalism is natural. And that's the lesson with Henry Nowak. And that's really what I wanted to say, because I kind of was going back and forth about discussing it live on this channel. But I kept tweeting about it for the past 3 days, and I kept going on social media, and I kept, talking about it, and I was getting angrier and angrier because people are not understanding. And that's really how I feel about it. And I think a lot of Americans are waking up to that specifically. Britain certainly is. And it's only a matter of time before other Western nations do as well. So just wanted to get that out there. Appreciate all of you guys for being here. Be sure to like the stream. Double tap your phone screens if you haven't already, especially if you enjoyed what I just said here, if you agree with me. Also, be sure to subscribe right now to American Advocates for more content like this. I do go live every single night, Sunday through Friday, and oftentimes on Saturday too. So turn on post notifications when you subscribe so you're notified every single time when I go live. I'll take a look at a few chats here before we wind down. Can I name the football game? I don't want to. I don't want to throw shade on any of the teams, but it is I think we buffered there for a second here. Man, a lot of stupid slop in chat, huh? Good. Thank you, Lifeguard, for taking care of the swine scum, the goy scum. Enemy team. Yes, it's an enemy team sports. That's what it is. Yeah, wow, there's a lot of pea-brain morons in chat here. Your conformity isn't a request. I agree with that, by the way, Four Winds. Assimilation is not supposed to be an option. And that was actually something I meant to expand on a little bit with my rant there, but I didn't. I'll do it real quick right now. The reason why the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 particularly is so significant is because it overhauled and radically changed our immigration policy here in the United States. We used to deliberately discriminate against allowing a lot of immigrants into America from most countries. We selectively took a look around and said, like my example of Somalia earlier, for instance, we looked at that and we said, why, with the condition of that country, why would we consider it a good idea to ever allow people in from that country? And the answer is there is no world where it makes sense to do that. But 1965 changed everything in the interest of fairness. and in the interest of, well, we have it so good here, we really owe the opportunity to the rest of the world to come here and live a good life. That's the lie. That's the psyop. And at first, it's all hunky dory because Europeans make up 90 to 95% of America at that time. So what happens? You allow 500,000 people in from other third world countries, and they quickly come in, and because they're surrounded by Europeans, they assimilate to European American culture. They learn English and they embrace our culture and our foods. And maybe they make their own home foods in their own home, but they learn English, they speak our language because they have to, because they don't have an option. There are no colonies at that point of their own people existing. They're dispersed across America in a very, very small minority fashion. And that's why assimilation occurs naturally in circumstances like that. And under circumstances like that, that's where I support immigration to a degree. But we've now gone through 60 plus years of open borders and of radically changed immigration that has undermined our American culture and way of life. And that's why I support shutting down the border for 20 years and establishing a remigration program where we actively revoke citizenships from a lot of these people and send them back to their country of origin. And I mean people who have come here and violated our laws, or people who come here and find themselves living off of our welfare and entitlement systems, taking taxpayer dollars to live, having multiple children while not working a job, etc. These are the people that don't belong here, and they're not trying to assimilate. And we have examples of this, like Dearborn, Michigan, for instance. I'm not a Muslim demonizer on this channel. I actually know quite a few very, very cool Muslims that I would be happy to share a living, like to share a street with. They come here and they get a very bad rap, a lot of them. But then you have Dearborn, Michigan, which is now 52% Muslim. And regardless of how you feel about individuals, what you have to recognize is when assimilation doesn't occur, and when instead you get the opposite, you get now a colony, you see the opposite result. Now it's the white people that are under pressure in Dearborn, Michigan to assimilate to Muslim culture. And I know this because I know multiple people personally who live there, and they have rocks thrown at them, they're women, for not wearing the traditional Muslim garbs and covering up more. And they blast their call to prayer psalms on outdoor speakers outside of their mosques. And the mayor is telling white people complaining about city streets being changed to streets like Osama Siblani Way, and saying, hey, I'm an American and I prefer my street names to sound like American names or to be representative of American historical figures, not Osama Siblani. I don't even know who that is. I don't like that you're changing the street names. The mayor says you're an Islamophobe and I don't think you belong here in Dearborn anymore. The mayor is a Muslim man. He said that to a white man who was born and raised in Dearborn, Michigan. It's the opposite now. And so that's what happens when you allow mass immigration at this scale. They centralize, and then they colonize, and then they force you out of your own homeland. And that's a big problem. So conformity is not a request. I agree. It's a demand, but it's hard to enforce that demand when you have millions upon millions upon millions. We're talking very likely at least 50 million illegal immigrants in this country, let alone legal ones. And this is what's happening. Stop everything. Did I just see a $2 super chat tariff from Howard Clegg? Thank you so much for that. And above that, I see Dylan LaPrade says, do you ever consider taking callers? Dude, I would love to. I'll get a show set up eventually where I can do a call-in show. I'll absolutely do that. I've stated that as a goal in the past. Other people have asked me to do that. I just got to get it set up. So yeah, I appreciate that question. And then in addition to that, a $1.99 super chat tariff from Lifeguard, who is probably no doubt happy that a good chunk of this stream was actually devoted to talking about this problem rather than just the Iran war, as always. So thank you for that, Lifeguard. Appreciate you. Knees Uncovered says, anyone who isn't a nationalist is a traitor. By default, I agree with that. Did I miss a super chat? I think I did. Give me 1 second. I think I might have missed one. Oh, I think I did. A $5 super chat from Yo Yo Duh. Man, a lot of super chats from you, man. I appreciate that. He says, to clarify, I was on the left because I'm an economic populist. Then after realizing that nationalism is a populist movement too, I incorporated this. Oh, okay. Dude, that's good to hear, actually. I can understand that. Now, economic populism is interesting, and the more I look into it, the more I will say I understand we are in what I would consider to be late stage crony capitalism. I still like capitalism, and I don't fully buy into the fact that it's a Zionist system like a lot of people do. I think capitalism, when managed correctly, is still ideal. However, I also am in favor of people like James Fishback who look at a lot of what's going on in Florida and basically say, hey, a lot of that money, $330 million annually, leaving Florida and being sent to Israel, could instead be withheld from Israel and dished out in a social program to newlywed couples that can go towards them buying their first home. And in doing so, would obviously increase birth rates or at least encourage that. Because one of the biggest problems plaguing our young generations is the housing market and buying a home. And that's sort of a social program, but I like the sound of it. And I will admit that. I don't like Social Security. I don't like Medicare, but I do like the sound of that. So maybe we're closer on the same page than I thought. And in any case, I appreciate that additional $5 super chat. You really donated a lot today. I really appreciate that. I sometimes get secondhand guilt. A lot of good people donate money, and I'll always take your money. But I do get guilty about it sometimes. So hopefully you feel like it was worth it to donate so much to me. Hopefully we agree more than we disagree, because I think you sound like a very reasonable person as well, if you're even still here. But thank you for that. You don't like free healthcare? I think free healthcare is a wonderful concept that in practice almost is guaranteed to fail every time. Like, I'm a nationalist, and so to some degree, in a perfect world, I would love a system where we could figure out free healthcare for sure, but it just never seems to work. And I don't think anybody's smart enough to figure it out, you know? So. Four Winds says it's nationalism or become cattle. Correct. And nationalism even will extend beyond the fight that we're currently facing with immigration. Four Winds. Nationalism needs to occur on multiple fronts, because we're dealing with mass immigration. We're dealing with a deliberate plan to replace us in our own country, but not just by illegal aliens, but also by AI. And so collectively, now collectivism, always when collectivism rises to prominency and becomes power, collectivism becomes a part of the problem, unfortunately. So there must be some sort of individualism that is maintained, but there's a delicate balance there. And right now we're living in such times. You are still here, Yo Yo Doug. Good, I'm glad. We are still living in such time. We're living in such times right now where collectively the human consciousness must rise up together to fight against AI. And AI is a massive threat, massive. And nationalism can play a part in that. But we must unify on certain things. And AI is one of them. Have you seen someone you loved dearly need treatment? Yes, multiple times, and guess what? We paid for it. So that's because we're productive members of society. And, you know, in a perfect, I think as close to perfect as it gets is you are afforded the opportunity. Listen, I could go off on too long of a rant over this. It all stems back to selling over a lot of our jobs to China. That would be good, meaningful jobs, meaningful work, good paying jobs with good benefits. We got to bring that back. And I could just go on. I can't go on anymore, Azorian, because I'm winding this stream down. But I appreciate your objections nonetheless. Nationalism makes you cattle? No. No, it does not. We're cattle right now, and we're far from nationalists whatsoever. Our taxes are taxed by taxes, and those are taxed by other taxes. That's called being a cattle. That's what that is. That's called being a pay cow. We're already cattle, and we're not even nationalists. Patriotism is part of nationalism. Agreed. Michael Cox says cell phones. Moo moo, says David Cooper. Good to see you in here, David Cooper. Good to see you too, Robert Stutter. It's good to see you. I recognize you as well. Legalized theft. I agree. Completely agree. All right, guys. You are a fascist cattle. Thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. And on that note, we're going to wind it down from here. I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. Thank you to all my super chatters. I really appreciate you. What's your name again? Yo-Yo. Massive. You're a superstar today, man. I really appreciate the super chats coming from you. But thank you, Lifeguard. I'll no doubt forget people who have super chatted. Beck Fan, Lifeguard, Howard Clegg, Michael Cox. Appreciate all of you guys. Any more I might be missing. My gifters. I've got the gifts today, the chats, the likes. Be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. That's free to do. Not too late to do it. Helps the show perform better in YouTube's algorithm. And also be sure to subscribe right now to American Advocates right here for more content like this. I'll be back live again tomorrow night, aiming for an actual early time tomorrow. 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to make that happen come hell or high water. Thank you for the last second flow state gift sent from Mod 1976-4. Appreciate that seriously so much. Thank you for that. That's what, 100 joules? Thank you. But I'll be back live tomorrow. Until then, glory to America, the best nation on earth. I say that as a proud Christian American nationalist. We can take this country back. But we've got an uphill battle against us and a lot of lessons to be relearned that were never taught to us by the previously psyoped boomer generations. It's a big battle ahead, but I'm ready for it, and I hope you guys are too. So glory to America, God bless the USA, and may God bless all of you. Until next time.